Welcome back to the Creepypasta Files, today with one of the most iconic creepypastas on the internet, ANANSI'S GOATMAN story. Originally a 4chan thread, this story is one of the only internet horror stories that actually scared me. So, let's jump right in.
It's been around for years. Even my nephews and nieces used to go and, come out here.
Whether it's to see the Goatman of urban legend or just for the fun of it, Denise Harris says many people have found reasons to travel up to the trestles that cross South Pope Lick Road.
Here's the basic rundown. Our poster, who we'll call Adrian, is visiting family out in Alabama. Him and his cousins, and some of his cousins' friends, decide to head into the woods to camp out in a trailer a little ways into the forest. However, they are in deep trouble when they realize there may be an imposter among them. Adrian and company are camping out, cooking some food on a campfire outside the trailers that are owned by Adrian's family. A neighbor who's been hanging out with them, referred to as Tanner in the story, decides to go back and ask his dad if he can camp with them. A couple of his friends tag along. As it's getting dark, Adrian and his campmates begin to smell something metallic, almost like ozone or your nose after a nosebleed. That's when Tanner and his two tagalongs come running into camp and rush right into the trailer. The rest of the group follows them inside. Tanner and friends are hysterical and look as if they've been crying. Tanner tells the rest of the group what happened. When they got to the house, Tanner's dad said that they could camp with the rest of them, but suggested they bring a hunting rifle. There had been some mutilated farm animals turning up recently. Tanner decided they'd be fine without the rifle and headed back. Now it was getting pretty dark. On their way back, they began hearing noises in the woods. Finally, they shine their lights out. Oh my gosh. Finally, they shine their lights to where the noise was coming from, and what they saw was the silhouette of a person standing still and facing away from them. The figure wouldn't respond whenever they would try to talk to them, so they headed to camp again. Then Tanner and his group began smelling the ozone-y smell, and began hearing what is described as gibbering coming from the woods. They see the figure one more time before they begin running, and one of them had seen something slink back into the woods when they turned around to look back for a moment. Assessing the story, the group assumes there's some group of people trying to mess with them. Someone brings up a story he heard about the Goatman, but the group is scared enough so they tell him to be quiet. Adrian mentions in the story that after the events described, he found out more about the Goatman, but we'll talk about that in the analysis part. The smell suddenly disappears, and the group eventually calms down. They decide not to head home in case it's people trying to mess with them. They don't want to be in danger walking through the woods at night. In the morning, everything seems fine, so they decide to stay another night, and everything is fine until about 1 a.m. The smell comes back, stronger than before. Everyone heads inside the camper, a little bit nervous, and they decide to make hot dogs. There are 12 hot dogs made. After they're all gone, someone mentions that someone got an extra while everyone else got only one. Adrian says there was only enough for the 12 of them. Then, someone yells, "Get it out!" Everyone rushes out of the trailer and they realize what's wrong. There should only be 11 of them. When they did the head count for how many people there were for food, there was 12. There'd been someone else with them for at least a day, and it's not just hot dogs as evidence. Adrian also remembers there being 12 people, but he assumes someone else knew the other person. But no one did. The group piled back into the trailer, and the girl who yelled, "Get it out," whose name is Kira, explained that she had noticed first, and just when she was about to say something, the person next to her grabbed her leg and whispered something unintelligible. That's when she screamed. Everyone groups together in fear, and Adrian falls asleep. When Adrian wakes up, the sun is just about to come up, and some people are already packing to leave. The group gets in a dispute as to whether to leave now or wait until light. The group decides to split up. 4 of them head back on their own, including Kira, and the rest stay and wait. Adrian has to leave last to lock up. It's daylight now, and a few others leave with Tanner to go get the rifle from the house. But there are a few people who don't want to leave, as they're not convinced that what's been happening is anything more than some pranksters. By 5 p.m., Tanner isn't back with the rifle. Around this time, someone notices Kira is outside by the fire pit, facing away from them. Adrian smells the metallic scent again. The group that stayed with Adrian still thinks this was a setup, and one of them goes outside and approaches Kira. Before she reaches her, Kira begins shaking strangely, as if she's laughing, but not making any noise. Adrian convinces the girl who went outside to check on Kira to come back in, and they lock the door. A little while later, with Kira still there, there's a banging at the door. Tanner screams,
"Let me the fuck in! Stop fucking playing!"
They open the door, and Tanner comes inside with the rifle. Tanner said he had seen someone outside by the fire pit when he came up to camp, but he said it wasn't Kira. The girl had stared at him slack-jawed. He ran to the trailer when he realized she was somehow getting closer the longer he stayed outside. Now that they were calmed down, Tanner noticed something. He whispered to Adrian, "You know there are only 7 of us here, right?" This stuff can get pretty hard to paraphrase and still make sense, so here's a direct quote from the story. It had been back inside the trailer while we were sorting out who was going where, and then when we all went inside to talk earlier in the day, it had just slipped right back in. We looked out the window and there was nobody there. So we recount everyone, and then basically I go over and ask everyone how many people were here earlier, and everybody says 8. I say, well, how many are there now? They all count, and then they realize there are only 7 people in the cabin. Tanner also brings the news that his cousin is coming up, and he'll drive them all home from Tanner's house. At this point, the sun is going down. After a little while, Tanner's cousin shows up at the campsite. Now the group is up to 8 people. The 7 that were here before, and Tanner's cousin. "Where's your other little buddy at? I figured she would meet me up at the cabin. Is she a little slow or something?" Tanner's cousin says that on his way up to the campsite, he found some girl on the trail. He asked her some questions that she didn't respond to, and when he kept walking, she followed. She kept staying behind him a little bit, and he went to go check if she was okay. He reached out to her shoulder, and as he described it, he misjudged the distance because she had somehow moved out of reach while he was staring right at her. Eventually, he came around a bend in the trail and he realized she wasn't behind him anymore. This is where the climax of the story kicks in, and if you want to know every detail, you're gonna need to read the story yourself, and I would suggest doing so. It's really good. But to sum up, the Goatman is back. The smell comes back and there's a knocking at the door, as well as a poorly mimicking human voice described as sounding kind of like this video. The voice is attempting to mimic Tanner, telling Adrian and company to let it in. The smell goes away after a bit, and the group can hear something wandering around in the woods near the campsite. Tanner's cousin goes out after a while and fires a couple shots into the sky, and then into the tree line, as the small noise that had been coming from the woods turns into an inhuman scream. Tanner's cousin gets back into the trailer, locks the door, and says he saw something crawling out of the tree line, and fired at it. It continued screaming until everyone fell asleep. Well, everyone except Tanner. Tanner stayed awake, and later elaborated that during the night someone came out of the bathroom and laid down with the rest of the group. He counted, and there were 9 people. This new person was the imposter. He stayed awake all night, pretending to sleep, not wanting to provoke an attack from this creature. According to Tanner, sometimes it would stand up and, quote, do this weird jittery thing or heave like it was laughing, but then it would lay back down. In the morning, they left. Tanner later said that the Goatman, or imposter, or whatever you want to call it, stayed with them almost the whole way, until it lagged behind and walked back into the forest. And that's the end of the story. So, what the hell happened here? The story can get a bit confusing no matter how chilling it is to read. In summary, Adrian and his group were getting continually infiltrated by the creature known as the Goatman. As I mentioned, Adrian later met someone who explained what the Goatman is. According to Adrian's friend, the Goatman is a man with the head of a goat, and he can shapeshift and gets among groups of people to terrorize them. So let's talk about the Goatman. Now, the name is most commonly associated with a Maryland cryptid who is part man, part goat. It's pretty standard cryptid fare, attacks people and livestock, makes creepy noises, and stalks in the woods. However, this story, to me at least, sounds a lot more like it's describing a skinwalker. The skinwalker is a Navajo legend. A skinwalker is a being who has the ability to shapeshift into animals and humans. Not much is generally known about its Navajo origins, though, due to the fact that most who know the lore of the creature are reluctant to share it. Due to its mysterious nature, non-native and mixed culture interpretations have taken on a lore of their own. Aside from the real-life history behind this story, let's take a look at the implications inside the story's world. Honestly, I don't think it's a Goatman or a skinwalker. It doesn't really fully fit the bill for either of them, in location or behavior. I believe this is its own new creature that kind of combined both. It's something else entirely, and that's what makes it scary. We fear the unknown, and this thing seems to have a set of rules that we've never seen before. But I think I've worked something out about it. It can only turn into something that it's come into contact with. In the story, the author points out the fact that the creature touches Kira. Later on, it uses the Kira form for pretty much the rest of the time. It used the fact that there were so many people in the beginning to disguise itself as someone foreign, but as the group dwindled, it needed to take the form of someone familiar, so it used Kira. It's pretty clear that the mutilated farm animals are the handiwork of this creature as well, but why it just decided to mess with the group instead of kill them when it had the chance, I don't know. Like I said, it has rules that we don't understand, and that's what makes it scary. So, we may never fully understand the creature in this story, but the story is scary enough on its own, and that's what makes it one of the scariest internet stories I've ever read. Let me know what creepypasta you want me to cover next, or your thoughts on this story, in the comments. The best comment will be pinned. See you guys next time.
Yeah, it's time.